All right, Jesse on Fire, welcome back to the channel. Let's do this. I got a lot to talk about today, so I don't want to get too bogged down in the intro like I can from time to time. So here's what we're going to do. We got 3 separate topics, totally unrelated. All of them are going to be good, though, I promise. Okay, so first of all, we got Conor McGregor's Twitter, because I got a whole thing to talk about there where definitive proof it's not Conor on Twitter, but how we know that also gives insight into what might be next for Conor. Because let's face it, Conor McGregor is the Tiger Woods of MMA, all right? Like, the sport is just better when he's in the mix. Might not be quite as bad, as when Tiger's in, or bad, good, Like, the PGA, when Tiger's playing, is so much better than when he's not. And it's certainly better when Conor is in the mix. I mean, look at, like, Conor's fought once in the last 2 years, basically, and twice in the last, 4, and we still talk about him constantly, and I have zero shame about that. He deserves it. He's that exciting. So I think that we have some insight on what he's going to do next. I actually think we have very definitive, certainly close to definitive. Anyway, then we're going to talk about Scientology. I'm going to tell you why we're going to talk about that. Because remember, when I did the alien video, then I did the nuclear weapons video, and I said there are just some topics that I know an astronomical of information about. And it is the same pattern every time, okay? I get interested in a topic and I just dive down that rabbit hole for a year. And in some cases, multiple years. Like in the case of nuclear weapons, a lot of years. As a matter of fact, UFOs has been constant. Yeah, as a matter of fact, I never really get over those interests. So UFOs, I know basically every instance that's ever happened. The mafia, I know every single mafia story. I know the lineage of all the families. I know who got arrested when, who narked on who. It's embarrassing, actually, the amount that I know about that stuff. And Scientology is one of these topics that I just dove down the rabbit hole. I know so much about Scientology that it is ridiculous, but it's fascinating. It's one of those stories. It's it is literally, at least current state, Scientology is probably one of the most toxic cultures in the history of organizations that have any semblance of power and size. I mean, I could say that pretty definitively. And then last, and definitely not least, I had the best conversation that I've had in 2020 by 100 miles this weekend, okay? So we were on vacation. We were at a resort in Napa, and a district attorney from another state was in California, and he was a district attorney in a city where it's a pretty neutral city, right? Like, we're not talking about the district attorney of Alabama, or Birmingham, Alabama, or the district attorney of whatever Portland or something, where you can basically stick a fork in them, exactly what partisan side of the fence they're on, right? This was a black district attorney in a city that is not one of those things. So basically, as it relates to what we're looking at in 2020, probably one of the most credible sources to ask questions to and hear his opinions ever. This is a person who was in charge of deciding which police to prosecute after police-involved shootings for 11 years, okay? This is a guy who also is undefeated in first-degree murder prosecutions. So if you can imagine me having that as a captive audience for multiple hours, we're gonna hang out. We're making plans of how we can all travel and hang out. I mean, obviously not super convenient, being that they don't, live in the immediate area, but we're gonna hang out because this is a dude I vibed with on a serious level, and I want to tell you guys everything about what he said, because fascinating as it relates to 2020. First, though, if you like the channel, subscribe and ring the bell. I'm very curious where you're going to find another channel that's going to start an episode off talking about Conor McGregor's Twitter, and then is going to finish talking about the credible opinion of a black district attorney relating to police shootings in 2020 and everything that's going on, right? And he's going to... I can't exaggerate how nice it was to talk to this guy, right? He validated a lot of things I thought, and then he changed my mind about a couple things because he's a much more credible source than I am, right? My problem is I don't know who to trust. I don't know what to go to in the media that I can listen to, right? It's I know you're lying. I know you're lying. I know everything's biased. Where is a trustworthy source of information? And I got one. And it was awesome. Anyway, all right, so Conor McGregor's Twitter. Let's do this thing. So Conor's Twitter. So last week, as anybody who follows me very closely knows, I'm 99% sure that I said this on the channel, but if not, I said it on TikTok, and if not, I texted it to every single person. I mean, we could validate this a dozen different ways, but when Conor tweeted, "I accept," everyone was like, "Oh, he's accepting a fight with Khamzat Chimaev." And I was like, no, he's not. No, he's not. He's definitely not talking to Khamzat Chimaev. He's talking to Tony Ferguson, right? If it's Conor, he's talking to Khamzat Chimaev. I'm sorry. If it's Conor, he's accepting Tony Ferguson, not Khamzat Chimaev, right? Like, Khamzat Chimaev is manipulating the media like a boss. But there's no way that Conor McGregor is accepting a fight with him. He's 8-0. He's not on Conor's level. Conor knows how to play this game. There's a 0 chance that Conor's fighting Khamzat. Do you know how much shit Conor would take if he fought Khamzat Chimaev? You know how much shit he would take if Tony Ferguson called him out, and so did a guy who's 8-0, who's never fought a ranked opponent, and Conor's I'll take that guy. Like, you think of all people, you think Conor doesn't understand the fight game? He understands the fight game better than anybody, which is exactly why I knew there's no chance he was talking to him. But the aftermath of that was Ariel. Okay, so first of all, let's see how this happened too. So the first place I saw Conor accepts fight with Khamzat Chimaev was on TMZ. And a bunch of people texted it to me, and I was like, okay, first of all, if you think this is correct, you're an idiot, but much bigger idiots are TMZ, because they're reporting this like this is real. Like, they saw Khamzat Chimaev go, "I went to Ireland and I chased Conor around, and or customs wouldn't let me in. Otherwise, I was going to kick Conor's ass." And again, I think that's genius. It's a genius play. But you're not going to run that theory. When Conor says, "I accept," you're not going to run that theory by someone who actually understands the dynamics of the game. Like, if anyone would have been like, "Hey, Jesse, we're about to run a story saying that this 'I accept' thing," which is totally ambiguous and in no way says that it's aimed at anyone specific, we're going to say that it's about Khamzat Chimaev, because of course it is. Because we just reported that Khamzat Chimaev tried to come out to Ireland to fight Conor, so that must be who he's talking to. And I've been like, hey guys, spoiler alert, if you actually understand the lay of the land, everyone's calling out Conor all the time. Conor saying "I accept" could literally apply to like a dozen people. And I can tell you who it doesn't apply to is the guy who's fucking 8-0. Conor, real Conor, not Twitter Conor, real Conor might not even know this guy's name, okay? Honestly. I'm actually not even exaggerating about that. Like, I think Conor stays relatively up to speed on recent fights, although maybe not, because generally after he watches an event that involves 155 pounds, the real Conor goes on Twitter and comments. So, you know, I would guess that Conor doesn't even watch every single event. It's totally possible he doesn't even know who this guy is. And you guys assume that just because Khamzat Chimaev said he flew to Ireland to fight Conor, that like Conor's people be like, "Hey Conor, did you see this? This nobody to Conor says that he flew to fight you because you said bad things about Khabib." That's not newsworthy if you're Conor McGregor, right? Like, he probably doesn't even know who he is. Nonetheless, though, "I accept," guaranteed, was his team. And then when Ariel hit Conor up, Conor's like, "Yeah, I have one comment about that, and only one comment, which is that I absolutely was not talking to Khamzat Chimaev." "Oh, well, you want to comment on who you were talking to?" "No." Anything to add? "No, just that I was not talking to that guy." And then he's on the phone with his guys at MacLife, who manages Twitter, which we verified. I told you guys that. And he's like, hey guys, how about no, okay? I know I told you to accept every fight, you know? Maybe he said that, seems that way because they accept every fight. But how about like a little bit of filter process, right? Like, you know, if a homeless guy says, "Hey Conor, I want to fight you," are you guys going to say "I accepted that"? Because there has to be a certain level of accepting, you know, like, yeah, Anderson, you want to say that I accept Anderson Silva? Sure, do that. How about we have a rule that they have to be a former champion or in the top 5 for you to say "I accept"? Otherwise, just ignore it or say something clever. Oh wait, you guys don't do clever. If I want clever, I need to do it myself, right? Let me tell you what I did not hear him say when Ariel says, "Is there anything else you want to comment on?" or "Who were you talking about?" What did he not say? What's a meaningful thing that Conor did not say when responding to the inquiry about that tweet? Ready? He did not say, I'm retired, right? Because a retired person would probably say, what are you talking about? Ariel, why would you even need to hit me up about this? I'm retired. Okay? Now, he might be on the phone with Ariel just clearing up the fact that he has imbeciles running his Twitter and that he wasn't talking to Khamzat Chimaev. But if he's not going to fight again, certainly at some point in that conversation, Ariel gets a quote that says, I'm fucking retired. Right? I mean, is that a stretch to make that assumption? Because I don't think it is. I think that's pretty common sense that if he was retired, he'd say he's retired. So, again, Conor, consider this me campaigning to run your Twitter, although I don't have time to do it. But you could just, I don't know, do an interview with me, and then I have no idea how is that gonna address the problem? It won't. It'll help my channel, though. That's what we're all trying to do, right? That's everyone's number one priority, helping Jesse on Fire's channel, right? All right, so next topic, Scientology. Switching gears. I'll timestamp this, though, I promise, because this is so all over the place that, gotta mix it up a little bit. Anyway, so Scientology is one of these just fascinating topics because it's, like if you look at the world like I do, like about studying people, there's nothing better than people acting completely crazy. Like when it's in organized fashion. Organized crazy is so fascinating to me. And I've actually never spoken, I might hit Nick Smalley up about this afterwards because I'm very curious what his thoughts on Scientology are, because I bet you that he's looked into it as well. Because that's why we vibe so well. It's because we look at things the same way, and I get organized crazy is fascinating, right? Fascinating. And Scientology is one of the most fascinating things if you're a smart person, because look, there is a trap that exists in looking inside. There are a million traps looking at Scientology, okay? First trap is if you don't know anything about Scientology and you walk in the door and you let them give you the spiel. So a little bit of background as it relates to Scientology, which I was unaware before I did a bunch of research on it. As a matter of fact, the way that I found out was, I'm sure this will shock no one, that when I kind of get into a rabbit hole of research, I start talking to literally everyone about whatever I'm researching, whether they seem like they would be interested or not. And one of those unwitting participants in that conversation around Scientology was my mom. And I found out that my uncle, who's passed away now, so I can tell this story without, risking him seeing it and being mortified. But he got involved with Scientologists when he was like 19, when he was in college, and they just fucking eviscerated his bank account. Like, I mean, they did what they do, and they took all of his money. Like, he had worked for years to save up for college and have a bunch of money for college, and they took it all of it. So, yeah, I mean, that has nothing to do with what my interest in Scientology was. It was just, when I told her, I was like, really? She's like, yeah. And I'm like, that surprises me absolutely zero. But so there's the trap of walking in there not knowing anything about them, because they are absolutely surgical assassins when it comes to mind fucking people, extracting their money, and then getting them to buy in wholesale to their ideology, and then making it their. I mean, it's not an accident they call it a religion, right? Like it used to be. So the genesis of Scientology, L. Ron Hubbard, this guy who was a science fiction writer, but before that was a Satan worshiper. Okay. For some reason, people breeze over that fact. Like people who are talking about Scientology, they literally breeze over that L. Ron Hubbard was a member of a satanic cult that was trying to conjure up the Antichrist, right? And the name of it was the like Ordo template or something like that. So Ordo template. So the acronym would be OT, right? Ordo template. And once he built out the Scientology bridge to freedom or whatever, the highest levels are OT1, OT2, OT3, OT4, all the way up to OT8. Now, do you think that's an accident? He's a Satanist, and the brand of his Satanist group is the acronym is OT, and then the top of his Scientology thing is OT. And when he was trying to conjure up the devil, his dream was to be an all-powerful religious leader. maybe there's something to this Satanism. That is not at all me suggesting that everybody go try to, there are better ways to get spiritual. I've heard DMT is very effective, as I will be able to report to you guys soon. Maybe. Anyway, so he starts this thing called, he writes a book called Dianetics, and it's basically like a process for solving trauma that you've gone through in your life. This is the whole thing about Scientology, is the basis of Scientology makes perfect sense. It makes perfect sense for why it would work, right? So basically what the core basis of Scientology is what this Dianetics thing was, which was you strap someone to a lie detector, and instead of asking them yes, no questions and trying to determine whether they're lying or not, you're actually using the meter that reacts to people's emotional reactions, which is telling you, theoretically telling you whether or not a person's lying in a lie detector test, and it uses it for therapy. It makes you talk about a traumatic incident over and over and over until the needle stops moving. It's genius. I mean, it's genius. It really is. It's genius, right? So if you had a father who abused you, like used to just beat your face in when you were younger, or put hands on you, whatever, you talk it through until the needle stops moving, and it is you kind of getting rid of the emotional reaction to that traumatic thing that lives in your past, and it just kind of one by one lifts these things off of your psyche, right? Now that makes perfect sense. I mean, I can completely understand why that would be incredibly effective therapy, right? That's a really smart idea, right? But then he realized that wasn't sticking in terms of the financial side. It was a fad that then petered out. So he starts Scientology. He calls it a religion, and then he makes it to where there are levels to this thing. So, the people who have been in Scientology and have graduated to the level of clear, which is level whatever, those people are literally seen in this social hierarchy as a bigger deal than people. So he sets up a cult environment where there are all these rules, all these acronyms, all these people and hierarchies, etc., and the social hierarchy. And so you want to grow up. It's like it really is the science. Like what L. Ron Hubbard did is genius with Scientology. However, it was all bullshit past those initial levels. Like all of it is a money-making scheme. And then their tactic, he was a genius salesperson. So there's all these tactics to get people to pay and pay and pay and pay and pay. Buy more classes, buy more classes. Oh, you're almost there. Where's your problems? Where's your ruin? What are you dealing with? And half the stuff they do makes no sense past the little, beginning part. They had these drug therapy drug therapy like camps. They would lock people in these places. They would put them in saunas and feed them all this niacin. And so like people with a niacin makes you get super flushed, and they would tell the people those are the drugs that are, the remnants of the drugs that are sweating themselves out. They would give them all these crazy vitamins that they killed a couple people at these places. Like the bottom line is the whole thing is one genius idea and then just nonsense built on top of it. And once, they had people like raiding the FBI, breaking into intelligence agencies' offices and stealing documents. It's crazy. But then once L. Ron Hubbard died, this guy named David Miscavige took over. He is an actual psychopath, like a full-on, full-blown psychopath, and he's 5'1". Okay, so how many people do we know that are 5'1" and are completely crazy? 2, him and Joe Silva. You know what? That's enough. I've given you guys a basis. Go do some research. Tom Cruise is totally fucking crazy. He thinks David Miscavige and Tom Cruise, if you could put those two guys in a room, David Miscavige is Tom Cruise's daddy. 100%. How bizarre is that? Anyway, whatever. There's honestly, what I'm realizing trying to tell this story is there are so many directions I can go with Scientology that I can't even tell a coherent story. So I'm going to leave you with this. If you're a Scientologist, your whole family's Scientologist, and you decide that you're going to leave, Scientology will demand that the rest of your family never talk to you again. It's called disconnection. They will make you shun your family. Okay, think about that. And they will enforce it, because if you don't do it, they'll have the rest of the Scientologists shun you, right? It's like, if anybody wants to stop paying and stop being a member of Scientology, they will absolutely bar you completely. It's I can't remember. There's some name for it. It's embarrassing. I didn't even. Embarrassing. What the hell's the name of that? Man, I'm rusty on Scientology. Probably should have done some more research before this video, but whatever. Anyway, let's talk about the really interesting thing. All right, so this DA that I talked to, okay? So like I said, he's a black DA in a purple city, another state, stud. Okay, the reason I started talking to him is because our kids rolled up, like just ran up on them, right? Like they had their dogs, my kids ran up on them. And listen, I love talking to people who have interesting jobs, who are smart and who are in the mix, right? And who are really powerful. That's a powerful position, man. Like this guy, we're talking about these cases and he's talking about giving people life sentences. I mean, he's talking about giving them life sentences like I'm talking about doing this video. That's his job. That's what he does, right? And it is fascinating. So a couple notable things. I asked him about the Rayshard Brooks case, the Atlanta shooting where the guy grabbed the taser, shot it at the cop, and then was shooting it when he was running away and got shot in the back. So I was a big proponent that was an okay shooting by the police. I'm like, dude, the guy took a taser off the guy's belt and shot it at a cop, and then, whatever. So I thought that was a good shoot, right? So I asked him about it, and he told me it was a bad shoot and convinced me that it was a bad shoot, actually. So basically what he said is he's like, listen, man, there's a reason why they make the tasers yellow. They make them yellow so you can identify what's in the suspect's hands. And the guy was shooting it backwards while he was running away, and he had already shot both shots. And the bottom line is he could have just let the guy run away. He had his ID. He had everything. He had his car. He had his ID. Just there's no reason to shoot him. And I asked him if he would have prosecuted him. He said he didn't know. But he did say he didn't. It was not a clean shoot as far as he was concerned. And he's about as credible a source as you're going to get, right? But again, he didn't say he would prosecute him. He just said that he thought it was a bad shoot. And looking at it through that light, I could see it both ways. I mean, I wouldn't say I completely changed my mind, but he has. If a district attorney who is in charge of making those decisions, who through a 2-hour conversation has certainly convinced me that he's not some BLM activist. He has actually specifically told me he's not that. And he says it's a bad shoot. I mean, he's the guy who makes those calls. Again, he didn't say he would have prosecuted him. He just was like, he said his opinion, right? But he also told me another crazy story. So he was telling me about being in San Quentin, right? So this is when we really bonded, me and this guy. He has to go up to a jail in his state, right? So he goes into this jail, and I asked him what it's like in those places, and he was like, dude, this was a top tier jail where the most dangerous criminals are. They're all rapists, all murderers, whatever. He's like, it's a super old facility. If these guys want to get at you, they're going to get you. He's like, if one of them wants to stab you, they're going to stab you. And I'm like, and you're the district attorney? I'm like, you put some of them in there, right? He's like, oh yeah. I'm like, that's so crazy. And I'm like, you know what's really crazy about that? And he's like, lots of things. I was like, yeah. I'm like, but what I was thinking about is how there's only one way to police that situation, right? And I'm like, and it's it is the responsibility of the COs. And that is that if one of these guys who's a lifer has nothing to lose, sticks a shiv in a public servant or any kind of civilian, the COs, it's their responsibility to strap that guy to a chair and break his fucking arms, right? Or shatter his kneecaps or something. There needs to be such an astronomical amount of pain on the other side of them acting out that way that they just would never do it. Because because what he told me is there's 2 COs for every 100 inmates. So you're literally just trusting the inmates not to attack a visiting district attorney who's there to question someone. Okay? Now, are you going to trust them because of their ethics, all the great decisions they've made, all the things they have to lose? No. So you have to put the stick in front of them for why they wouldn't do that, and you need to make that stick real sharp, right? So that's literally what I said. I'm like, it's their responsibility to strap that guy to a chair and break his fucking arms and shatter his legs. And he looked at me, he literally went like this with his sunglasses, and he was like, that's exactly right. He's like, the rules do not apply in that place, or at least the rules that you think would apply out here don't apply in there. He's like, that's correct. And then that's when he started having much more frank conversations with me. Anyway, that's what I got. It's not the best video, I am exhausted, okay? I have been partying for 3.5 straight days, but now I'm done, and I owed you guys a video, and so I did one. So if you hate it, I apologize. I will make it better tomorrow. I love you guys very much. Thank you for the support. Subscribe to the channel, ring the bell. Peace.